Hey, what's up, guys? Hello, Footballtalk here. Back for week 2 of our divisional draft breakdowns, as we're running through every single pick of every single team in the 2021 NFL draft. Last week we already started with the AFC and the NFC North, and this week we're going to focus on the East, starting with the NFC side of things. Just quickly again, this is going to be more of a podcast version where I just let my thoughts out there. And the way we're going to do this, we're going to go through these teams alphabetically. I'm going to quickly run through every single pick and then discuss them in detail, what I think about them individually, how they fit with the new teams, and then talk about the class as a whole a little bit, before at the end of the video, I'm going to rank the 4 classes from this division. And I just want to dive right in here with the Dallas Cowboys, and they selected first round, 12th overall, Micah Parsons, the linebacker out of Penn State, round 2, 44th overall, Calvin Joseph, cornerback Kentucky, round 3, 75th overall, Osa Odigizua, the interior defensive lineman out of UCLA, 2 third-round picks, 84th overall, Chauncey Golston, the edge rusher / interior defensive lineman out of Iowa, round 3, 99th overall, Nashawn Wright, the cornerback out of Oregon State, then 2 fourth-round picks, 115th overall, Jabril Cox, the linebacker out of LSU, and 138th overall, Josh Ball, the offensive tackle out of Marshall. Round 5, 179th overall, Simi Fehoko, the wide receiver out of Stanford. Round 6, 2 more picks, Quinton Bohanna, the interior defensive lineman out of Kentucky. And 227th overall, Israel Mukuamu, the cornerback out of South Carolina. And then finally in the 7th round, 238th overall, Matt Farniok, the interior offensive lineman out of Nebraska. So another long class here, 11 names, tied for the most in this draft. And let's start at the top here, Micah Parsons, 12th overall. Super talented young linebacker. I think he's only 20 years old. A converted defensive end coming out of high school. And he presents a lot of things that you want to see at a linebacker position. Just at his pro day, ran in the high 4.3s, I believe, or maybe low 4.4s. So a special athlete. Still kind of transitioning to the linebacker position. There are some things that he certainly has to clean up still. At this point, a very assignment-proof player. Not really somebody who you just plug in the middle and let him clean up everything that's coming to the defense. That's a critique point by some. I actually more prescribe to the saying that do your job. So I think that it's rare that he actually just messes up. The thing I am a little bit worried about with him, when you look at him in pass coverage, he doesn't look supernatural yet, a little stiff moving around. We barely have any tape on him in man coverage. The way I think he can make an impact on passing downs, however, is as a pass rusher, blitzing through the middle or lining up on the edge, where that conversion, you make it a little bit easier for him, let him do those things that he maybe was more natural at earlier in his career, has some special skills in that regard. And what I do appreciate about him as a run defender is that even if there's a lineman right in his face and they're engaged with each other, he's that ability to go to either side of the block, over the top or underneath, and has that closing burst to still get hands on the ball carrier. So either way, he can be an impact player in the middle of that defense, and that's really what Dallas needed. The interesting part here is, however, with Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch under contract still at this point, that's going to be a very interesting decision next year, especially with another linebacker on day 3, who I'll get to in a little bit, who I really like. You have those 2 guys that maybe, what do you think about your veterans? Like Jalen Smith, I think there's a potential out in his contract next year. And Leighton Vander Esch, obviously, they just didn't pick up his 50 option, so this is his last year under contract with the team. So this is going to be very interesting next year in the offseason, what they're going to do. 12th overall was right on value for me, and I think I had Calvin Joseph, the next pick, the corner out of Kentucky. I had him right at 44th as well. He's a guy that I really liked in this process and was low on most people's boards. But when you just look at the natural talent that he has, the potential for him, other than Caleb Foley, who was my number 1 corner, and maybe JC Horn, I think Joseph has the best potential in this draft at the cornerback position. Has the length, has the fluidity, has the natural coverage skills. He had some trouble at LSU. 1 year he was there, and then after the year transferred, some off-the-field stuff. He also has a rapping career going on the side, which I really don't mind at all, but there were some things, there were some rumbles, especially with Parsons as well. I thought Parsons could be falling, and Joseph, so that's kind of the thing for the Cowboys. They like those guys with some off-field stuff going on. But in general, on the field, Joseph is a very intriguing player to me. You saw it in the SEC, matching up against some of the best wide receivers in the country. He more than held his own against some guys like Devontae Smith. He more than held his own against some of the top receivers in the conference in man coverage and cover 3. So really a good fit for that Dan Quinn system. The things that he has to certainly clean up still as a tackler, really kind of an ankle biter, really arriving low always and ending up on the turf to some degree. There's still a little bit of wasted movement that he has to clean up. But overall, a very intriguing player. You put him next to Trevon Diggs. Those are two super talented young corners. And if they can develop together, that could be a tandem for years for them. And then 75th overall, Osa Odighizuwa, an interesting guy coming out of UCLA. He's only, I believe, 6'2", 280 pounds or something like that. But he played a lot of nose tackle or one technique for the Bruins. Kind of weird, stocky build, but really long arms, like 34.5-inch arms or something like that. So he can stack blocks and keep them at distance, rip the blockers to the side and make a tackle on the ball carrier. Really good anchor for that size. Not always going to blow you away with some of the things that you see in terms of the quickness and just overpowering guys or something like that. But the overall package is really good. As a run defender, like I said, can definitely make an impact wherever you line him up. They're probably looking at him as a free technique, so just get up the field. We haven't really been able to see him in that role, being able to do that. So this is going to be an interesting fit. Is he going to be more of a guy who's going to stack blocks and just hold his ground? Or are they going to ask him to be a penetrator like that technique usually is? So an interesting player. I felt in that range. That's about where I had him. Maybe a couple of spots early, but I'm perfectly fine with that pick. Then Chauncey Golston, 84th overall, is a little early to me, I have to say. He's a guy that I really thought was impressive at the Senior Bowl. Won a lot of those one-on-ones, especially sliding inside. Didn't see that quite on tape, but a guy that has a non-stop motor, pretty good technique. Has that ability to condense and put him inside on passing downs. So he's a versatile defensive lineman who's probably not going to start because they have DeMarcus Lawrence and Reddy Gregory there on the edges. Maybe they look at him transitioning to a free technique because it did add some weight going on to the Senior Bowl. Going to be interesting to see how they want to deploy him, especially with Osa, who I just talked about. Do they look at those guys potentially playing the same position? And who is going to get most of the snaps? But absolutely, with Golston, you have the versatility on passing downs to sub him in there, moving around. But then 99th overall is the pick that I just didn't understand. Nashawn Wright, cornerback at Oregon State. Way too early for me. I looked at him more as a 6th round pick probably. And I get it, the fit for that type of system that they want to run. Like I already said, with a lot of press bail and probably some more man coverage, which you saw at Dan Quinn. But Wright to me is such a skinny frame. He's going to have his problems changing direction. He's not a great tackler. Like, there's a lot of things that I don't love about him. If you get him later as a toolsy corner, he's really long. I think he's like 6'4", something like that, but only like 180 pounds. So definitely a unique size. You don't see a lot of guys with those measurements really succeed at the cornerback position. And there are certainly some skills there as a coverage defender. But to me, to get him at the end of the top 100 picks, that's definitely too early for me. However, then we move to day 3. And they might have gotten one of the biggest steals here. 115th overall, Jabril Cox, the linebacker at LSU. He was my 40th overall prospect. I really loved him on tape. He was my 5th overall linebacker. And he's very different to Parsons at the top here because he might not be the most physical guy for the position. Played a lot as a big nickel or splitting the difference to the slot receiver. So he's a guy that you want out there in space. Incredible in coverage. The hip fluidity for a linebacker is almost absurd. His first interception with the Tigers, I think they were going up against Mississippi State, where he's covering a dig route, and he's leveraged the wrong way as if he was carrying down the post. And then the number 3 from a trips alignment makes the cut to the inside. He flips around, undercuts the route, takes it the distance. Like, super impressive plays in coverage. Just the way that he can take away passing lanes, cover guys in man coverage. Pairing him up with Parsons long-term maybe was going to be more of the blitz on passing downs. And then you have Cox, who you can deploy against tight ends or running backs, whichever gives you more trouble. He's a guy that can neutralize those type of players. Also a blur as a blitzer, especially if you send him off the edge maybe, combined with a stunt to the inside. Like, there's a lot of things to like here. He's not going to be a guy who's going to take on blocks, probably more looking to evade those guys. But if you put him in the right role, and if you pair him up with Parsons maybe, that could be a really good match going forward. And like I said, I could see those guys being the two starting linebackers and nickel packages a year from now if they want to move on from Smith and Leighton Vander Esch because of the contract situation and the amount of money that they're paying to Dak Prescott and guys like that. The second 4th round pick, the offensive tackle out of Marshall, Josh Ball. He's an aggressive, highly talented, athletic offensive tackle prospect who strikes and drives low in the run game and has the feet to mirror twitchy rushers. But he had some issues at Florida State where he was first, got suspended there, and then there's some things on the field where he sees pads ride way too high, and his technique overall is a work in progress. He still needs to add some weight room strength, but I think getting him behind those two offensive tackles, even though they rarely actually stay healthy, but if he has the luxury, learning how to be a pro, build up his body, and learn from those type of guys, he's somebody who has the potential. He could definitely pay off down the road, just a little early maybe here for me. And then Simi Fehoko, another freak show in terms of the athletic testing, running in the low 4.4s at 6'3", 220 pounds. And unlike a lot of guys at that size, it's not build-up speed with him. He has that real burst off the line of scrimmage going into his routes to go with some good body control and strong hands. But he's not as physical working through contact and freeing himself for defenders down the field. He's definitely an interesting developmental receiver, but ran a very limited route tree at Stanford and had a bunch of drops. So he's another guy who you like to invest down the road. They have 3 starting receivers, which Fehoko is just not going to touch. But to get him in there, learn from those guys as well, build him up as a pass catcher, that makes some sense. And then in the 6th round, Quinton Bohanna out of Kentucky, one of the picks that really made some sense here for me. Played at 6'4", 355 pounds as a nose tackle listed in Kentucky. He was down to 330 at his pro day and had some solid testing for that size. And the Cowboys desperately needed somebody in the middle of that defense and improve their second to last ranked rushing defense, where he can be engaged with the center and take a bump from the side from a guard as well, but definitely has to improve his consistency and pad level. He came half a tackle for loss short of hitting double digits over his last 3 years combined, but only had 2 sacks, and he's never reached 400 snaps in any of his seasons with the Wildcats, as he was taken off the field a lot on 3rd downs. But there are some things to like here as well in the passing game. Comes off the ball with some urgency and has that ability to grab cloth and pull centers to the side, although he probably won't help them out a lot on those longer downs. But he's somebody that I think, if he can get his pad level right every single time, he can really upgrade that run defense. And for nose tackle, he has some skills as a pass rusher. And the second 6th round pick here, Israel Mukuamo, another really tall, big cornerback. I think an inch shorter than Wright, who they picked up in the 3rd round. But definitely more of a dense frame, more of a bigger guy. Doesn't have that long speed, and he will have some trouble matching up against those quicker guys. What you really look at him as is somebody who can crowd receivers at the line of scrimmage and being able to bail in cover 3. South Carolina played him some at free safety last season, which he looked really out of position, more out of necessity. I think Mukwamo, he's a guy that I didn't have as high, but to get him here in the 6th round, really at the back end of the draft, I think that's perfectly fine. And finally, Matt Farniok, the guard/tackle from Nebraska. He's the one guy in this video that I didn't get to watch in particular. Only saw him there on the screen when I was watching Brandon Hymus, the left tackle. But for Farniok, 26 starts at right tackle, 9 at right guard. Athletic testing was average. Probably looking at him as a dual prospect who could make the roster because of the flexibility. But when I look at that depth chart, there's about 8 guys at least that I would put ahead of him and having a better chance to make the roster. So maybe he's going to be somebody that they carry on the practice squad. And when I look at this class overall, kind of interesting at the top here of Micah Parsons. I still really believe that they were looking at one of those top 2 corners at number 10 overall. But at least they were able to trade down a couple of spots and get some resources from the division rival who wanted to go up to get Devontae Smith. Then Calvin Joseph in the 2nd. Like I said, one of my favorite corner prospects. And first 2 guys obviously with the off-field stuff. We'll have to see how that turns out. They probably get a starting free technique in Osa Odigizua. John C. Golston is somebody who has some versatility in passing downs. Then I really thought Nashawn Wright, while he may be a scheme fit, was definitely a reach. However, I love Jabril Cox as somebody on passing downs. You have Parsons who can do some things as a blitzer, and then you have Cox who you can deploy in coverage, covering backs and tight ends in man. And then just some athletic developmental prospects, with Quinton Bohanna being the one that I think will have some time early on the field, because they really needed some big bodies on the interior. So overall, Jabril Cox definitely a steal. The rest, a lot of them quite in line where I thought they would go, and a couple of reaches, so okay class, let's call it. And with that, let's move on to the New York Giants. And they went first round, 20th overall, Kadarius Toney, the wide receiver out of Florida. Round 2, 50th overall, Azeez Ojulari, the edge rusher out of Georgia. Round 3, 71st overall, Aaron Robinson, the cornerback out of UCF. Round 4, 116th overall, Allison Smith, the edge rusher out of Northern Iowa. And then 2 6th-round picks, 196th overall, Gary Brightwell, the running back out of Arizona. And 201st overall, Rodarius Williams, the cornerback out of Oklahoma State. So first and foremost, Dave Gettleman trading down twice when he's really known for not moving off his spot usually. That's very interesting. And you look at it, when he would have originally picked 11th overall, apparently the Giants brass, they were furious that the Eagles had traded up those 2 spots to grab Devontae Smith, who they really liked. But they traded down 9 spots with the Chicago Bears in exchange for a 1st and a 4th round pick next year to go with a late round pick swap, I believe it was. And they still got Kadarius Toney, who's definitely not a bad consolation prize. Obviously, he's not as complete a receiver as Devontae Smith at this point. As a route runner, there is some rawness to his game. Not the most precise guy in that regard, but he has that explosiveness. He has that unique style of running routes where he has the ability to win vertically, but also shake defenders out of their boots. And the party really starts with him when the ball is in his hands. Just so unique as well with the moves that he sets, making guys miss in the open field, and has some balance to his running as well. When there's an arm tackle flying at him, and he just keeps on going. A line that I really liked, that I came up with some point with him, is you have a lot of guys that can break ankles, but this guy will tear ACLs. Like, some of the moves that he makes, you would think that he's getting hurt himself, just because of the way he can like drop his knees and ankles and explode out of it. But he always seems to come out clean while defenders end on the ground. Like I said, the route running, there is some rawness. He's going to have to work in a more timing-based offense where he doesn't have the luxury of just setting up defenders with different hesitation moves and all that kind of stuff. And he actually has a rather slender frame, I would say, but still Toney, a very explosive player, adds another element to that offense. You have Kenny Galladay as your big-bodied X-receiver working down the field as well, but more in a jump ball kind of way. Then you have Darius Slayton, who's a speedster on the opposite side, Sterling Shepard in the slot, who's more of your possession type of guy. And now you add Toney, just add some juice to that unit. And you can tell that Dave Gettleman and those guys, they really want and kind of need Daniel Jones to succeed as a quarterback because he was such a high pick for them. And to do so, they're surrounding him with all the weapons necessary. And then they come back in the 2nd round, 50th overall, trade down again. They moved on 8 spots and collect the 3rd round pick next year. And they still get Azeez Ojulari, man number 3 edge rusher coming out of Georgia. And with him, there were some issues with his knees, some medical concerns there that I'm not totally aware of. But on the field, he's one of the top edge rushers in this class for sure. He often gets banged for being like 240, 245. But I really think he plays much bigger than that size indicates. Obviously, as a pass rusher, has the burst and bend to get around the edge and win that way. But also some power to him where he can work the long arm off that if he gets tackles in a bad position. And he really excels with the cross chop. That's by far his top move. And the thing with him, he uses so many variations of it, depending on how offensive tackles approach him, the different ways that he can attack their hands. And then as a run defender, he's very underrated in that regard. At that size, he's not going to just have those heavy hands and just control the point of attack, bully guys back into the backfield, but he can more than hold his own in terms of an edge setter. And what I really love about him is the way he's dealing with pulling linemen. When you watch the Alabama game, you have 350, 360 pound Deontay Brown barreling right at him, and that guy just stops in the backfield when Ojulari takes him on. So super tough guy, doesn't mind throwing his body around. The thing with him, dropping in coverage, he doesn't feel very comfortable at it. You can tell on tape. So he's probably not going to be asked to do a whole lot of it. And you look at the Giants, defensive coordinator Patrick Graham, he's one of the best guys at drawing up different pressures, with different games up front on the D-line and all kind of things. And now you had a true speed threat off the edge that they didn't really have. That adds another dimension to the mix. And then in the third round, Aaron Robinson, the cornerback out of UCF, that's about the range where I thought he would go. Had him about in that range as well, maybe a little lower, but a guy that I really enjoyed watching as well. I think he's only like 5'10", 5'11", a little undersized for an outside corner, and he was playing a lot in the slot, but has plenty of experience on the outside as well. And what I really like about him, such a scrappy, competitive guy, really will fight you from the snap, and at the catch point, very disruptive, very aggressive in that regard. That can get in trouble sometimes, and like I said, there are going to be a little bit of limitations with that size on the outside. If somebody's just 5 inches taller than him, there's not going to be anything that he can do as much as he wants to fight guys at the catch point. But good feel in zone coverage, and in man, even if he takes a couple of false steps, he has that explosive reactionary athleticism to be able to get back into phase. So he's somebody that they're going to really like. And it's going to be interesting with the Giants because they obviously have James Bradbury, and he brought in Dory Jackson this offseason via free agency, who, while he does have plenty of experience as a nickel, they're probably going to be the two starting outside corners for the Giants. And then you have Darnay Holmes, who I like quite a bit last year, who they drafted, being able to play in the slot. Julian Love or Logan Ryan, whoever's not starting at one of those safety spots, could be in that competition as well. So it's not going to be an easy road for Aaron Robinson, but to get him here in the third round, I think he's the most likely to start in the slot. And with that, we move on to day 3. At the top here, Allison Smith, the edge rusher out of Northern Iowa. Really interesting prospect. Super long, super quick. Kind of reminded me of Daniil Hunter when I watched him, because there is some rawness, even though Smith is more technically sound at this point than Hunter was coming out of LSU. You watch the tape at Northern Iowa, put up some impressive numbers there in terms of TFLs and sacks, and you were thinking, how does that translate to the next level? And we'll still have to see fully how the transition works. But you go down to the Senior Bowl, you watch him just kind of whooping guys up and down the line. Obviously, he's not going to win every rep, and he's a little small for somebody who you can imagine playing on the inside to some degree on passing downs. But really interesting with that length and quickness, being able to win in a lot of different ways. Not the most powerful rusher necessarily, pretty good run defender, and has that versatility on passing downs. You add another guy, you now have Azeez Ojulari, Allison Smith, with Leonard Williams. It's going to be a fun group on passing downs who you can throw out there. And then in the 6th round, Gary Brightwell, the running back out of Arizona, packs a lot of burst and a shifty running style to where he can actually make defenders miss completely. Plus, he also doesn't shy away from contact, even though there's not a ton of power to drive a pile or anything like that. And I like his balance and approach in pass pro, even though he's probably undersized to do so and is going to be run over by some guys. And only 19 career catches for 121 yards, and he's dropped 5 of those catchable targets that he's had, as well as in the run game, only cracked 500 rushing yards once in his career, and that came all the way back in 2018. So obviously with Saquon Barkley there, he's not going to get a ton of touches, but you add the kind of change of pace back, a really explosive guy. I think that makes some sense here to get him in the 6th round and complement what you have in Saquon, who's going to be as much of a workhorse as we have in the NFL today. And finally, Rodarius Williams, the Oklahoma State cornerback, really physical, technically sound, and patient corner, very competitive, and what you really like with him, mirroring guys from the line of scrimmage, just the discipline and the physicality that he displays. Last season, on 255 coverage snaps, he only allowed 10 of 21 targets to be completed against him for 148 yards and no touchdowns, so that's highly impressive. His click and close and long speed aren't something that you really get excited about, and he'll already turn 25 in September, which is probably a big reason why he fell this far, but purely based on tape, he was my number 15 overall cornerback, and I think he should have definitely gone a little bit higher here. And like I already said, I counted down some of those guys, some of those names that they'll have in the secondary, so he's not going to play a ton, but to get him as your cornerback 4 or corner 5 even, that's some really quality depth to get here in the 6th round. And you don't really feel bad about throwing him out there because he's already very technically sound and just a very complete player already. So overall this class, you have to consider what they picked up already next year to add on top of what they have here. And they get Kadarius Toney, like I said, an explosive web, adds another dimension to that offense. Azeez Ojulari and Allison Smith really going to boost that pass rush even more so. Aaron Robinson could be a starting nickel. And then a couple of depth pieces who can be thrown out there and add some value. So overall, a pretty impressive class, I would say, especially if you add on top of it a first and a third round pick next year. And with that, let's move on to the Philadelphia Eagles, who went first round 10th overall after trading up a couple of spots. Devontae Smith, the Alabama wide receiver, round 2, 32nd overall. They went back to Alabama, got Landon Dickerson, the interior offensive lineman. Then third round, 73rd overall, Milton Williams, the interior defensive lineman out of Louisiana Tech. Fourth round, 123rd overall, Zach McPherson, the corner out of Texas Tech. Round 5, 150th overall, Kenneth Gainwell, running back out of Memphis. Then 3 6th round picks, 189th overall, Marlon Tuipulotu, the interior defensive lineman out of USC. 6th round, 191st overall, Teron Jackson, the edge rusher out of Coastal Carolina. And 224th overall, Jacoby Stevens, the safety slash linebacker out of LSU. And then finally in the 7th round, 234th overall, Patrick Johnson, the edge rusher out of Tulane. So at the top here, Devontae Smith, we all knew that they really wanted to add a wide receiver, add the number one weapon. And they kind of knew as well that the Giants were in the market for him. So they didn't want to risk it, give up a third round pick, I believe, to move up 2 spots and secure that guy. And Devontae Smith, to me, he was my wide receiver 3, but only because he had Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle, who were both top 6 overall prospects for me. I just really love those 2 guys. And Smith, while there are some concerns that are obvious with his size, only 165 pounds, a very slender build, which is also why he was called the Slim Reaper, but he was really tearing SEC cornerbacks up. One of the most complete route runners and overall receivers that we've had coming out in recent years. Can take a slant route 70 yards to the house, but also win down the field, stacking vertically, and being able to win along the sideline. There was a lot of easy production on like mesh concepts where I was running a shallow cross, so it was wide open and could just turn it upfield. And there's going to be some concerns at that size, just taking the pounding in the NFL. But for people to talk so much about, will he be able to get off press, when he was one of the very best receivers in college football at doing so, just so efficient with hands and footwork, with different stutter releases to get off the line. Just really elusive guy as a route runner. And what I really like about him, as we're talking about the physicality as well, he plays the ball in the air as if he was 6'4", 6'5", just so aggressive at attacking it whilst it's in mid-flight, and comes down with a lot of big catches that way, as well as I really like the way he's working back towards the ball, towards the quarterback on like curl routes and stuff like that, where it looks like a defender has a clear shot at the ball, and all of a sudden Smitty comes kind of out of nowhere and grabs it in front of that guy. So that's a lot of things that you can really like. And to give him to Jalen Hurts, give him back a receiver that he's already familiar with to some degree, since Smitty was a freshman when Hurts played his last season as a starter at Alabama. Now you add him as a dependable number one guy. You have Jalen Reagor on the other side, some pressure off him. I really like Dallas Goedert at tight ends, and they have some other receivers as well. So this offense has some weapons now, and they can really evaluate what they have in Jalen Hurts with those surrounding pieces, which the next guy, Landon Dickerson, he's a big part in that as well, because if it wasn't for torn ACL, he would have probably been the top interior offensive lineman drafted, just one of the most complete linemen that we've seen out in recent years. He can probably play all 5 spots along the line, even though he's going to have some problems at tackle, but we're thinking about interior free, no issue putting at either one of those spots. Although he's like 6'6", 325 pounds or something like that, he can get down low and dig guys out of gaps on man schemes. Very good at putting his body in between defenders and the ball in zone schemes. In the pass game, really good at IDing what's going on, working in concert with his guards and keeping those A-gaps clean. Almost no pressure up those for Alabama these last couple of years. And when he's engaged with somebody, has the anchor strength and pretty good ability to square up guys as well. Very patient in that regard. And that's also him working up to the second level and just targeting linebackers, taking them out of the way. So all around, one of the most complete prospects, like I said, on the interior offensive line. The issue here, really 4 season-ending injuries, and he's coming off that torn ACL. Although at the Alabama Pro Day, you already saw him doing cartwheels, so I think he's going to be fine. But that's definitely a concern, because for Philadelphia, they've had so many injuries along the O-line, and to bring in another guy who has that history, that's going to be an interesting thing. But if he plays up to his full potential, and if he can stay healthy, this guy to me has Hall of Fame potential, I believe. And then in the third round, Milton Williams, the interior D lineman out of Louisiana Tech. Certainly not that high a floor, but the upside is enormous with him as well. You look at the athletic testing at his pro day, was in the 93 percentile at every single event, and in the 99th percentile in all but two, I believe. And you see that on tape. There was a big jump from 2019 to 2020, so you can say kind of a one-year wonder maybe, but just the quickness, the explosiveness, the power of the snap, he can really take over on a couple of plays and just make things happen that you don't see from Conference USA D linemen. Really dominated the conference last season, and he was kind of playing out of position as like a 4-eye or even head up on the offensive tackle at times, having to take on some double teams and not just being able to just shoot through the gap, which with Philadelphia, they're probably looking at him as a pure free technique, someone you can get up the B gap and just be a disruptor. As a run defender, the hand placement and the pad level can be a little inconsistent at times, and as a pass rusher, doesn't always perfectly hit his aiming spots and has to rush with a little more of a plan. But you see those snaps where he perfectly strings together moves and just being able to get around guys, as well as being able to use power. So really a very high ceiling with this kind of guy. And you add him into that room with Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, who you brought in last offseason. They also drafted another guy 3 rounds later who I really like. So he's going to have some time to sit and develop, and he could pay off big time going forward as those other guys are starting to age. And then in the 4th round, Zach McPherson, the cornerback out of Texas Tech, rather unknown guy, kind of lost in the shuffle here. Maybe a little early for my taste as well, but I get the talent that they see in this kid. Has some solid measurements and good athletic testing, although he does have a bit of a wiry frame. But very disciplined and physical, challenging receivers off the line in press coverage. Has good fluidity in cover 3 turns and carrying guys down the post. And he's quick to come up when the ball comes out, stays true to his contain responsibility, and only missed 3 tackles on 57 attempts last season. However, there is some sluggishness in his change of direction, and he's still improving in his route anticipation. But I wasn't too surprised to see him hear his name called in that range. So I thought that was fine value. And especially now, at 150th overall, they get Kenneth Gainwell, the Memphis running back, who I really thought was a day 2 guy. A little undersized for the position maybe, but has great contact balance for it. Can run between the tackles, but really that burst out to the edge is what threatens the defense. And once he gets to the second level and into the open field, his creativity as a ball carrier, the ability to string together moves, be elusive, make guys miss, that's what's really special about him. As a pass catcher as well, the versatility he presents, being able to be split out wide, work out at the slot, run routes from the backfield, has shown the ability to win down the field, but also obviously catching the ball in space and making things happen. Won't offer you much in pass protection, and he's probably going to be like a 3rd down back maybe early on. But you add him there with Miles Sanders, you also have Boston Scott, who is an overachiever constantly as a UDFA. I think Gainwell right away is going to be like their RB2, who's going to play a lot on 3rd downs and be involved as a pass catcher. Now you can spread the field, get him out there as a coverage indicator, motion him in and out of the backfield. So he was a great pick there. And then I also loved Malum Tuipulotu, the USCD tackle. To get him there at the 6th round, I had him about 100 spots high in my personal rankings. I'm not going to blow you away with athleticism necessarily, but for a shade-nosed body, it's pretty good. And you saw it last season when his partner in crime, Jay Tufele, the other D tackle out of USC, went at the top of day 3. When he was opted out of the 2020 season, Marlon really took over as the rock in the middle of that defense, being able to hold his ground in the run game, take on single blocks and control those. And then as a pass rusher, he's kind of underrated, I believe. I'm not sure if he's going to play a ton on 3rd downs, but when they moved him in the B gap, gave him a runway, a lot of space to work, to be able to ride them through the pocket and get the push up the middle. But also when they tried to set him too hard, that ability to get around as well. So I really think he's a very underrated player. With Javon Hargrave as that nose tackle there already, I'm not sure how much he's going to play in year 1, but you probably get a cheap replacement. I'm not totally sure about the contract situation, but if you want to move on for Hargrave, I'm not sure if the drop-off is that huge, even though I like him as a player, but I really like Tuipulotu as well. And then move on to Ron Jackson, the edge rusher out of Coastal Carolina. Another guy, very physical player on the edge. Maybe doesn't have the most dynamic skill set, but you watch the BYU game, him making plays all over the field. the best defender on the Coastal Carolina team, which I have to remind you here, they were top 10 at the end of the year basically until the bowl game. You watch him during the Senior Bowl, he looked a little small moving inside to some degree, which at that body type you would expect him to have his most success there, and he doesn't have that true speed off the edge that he's going to threaten tackles with. But like I said, somebody who's just going to keep on working, you can get in the rotation, you move him in there, he's going to play some quality snaps for you. Then Jacoby Stevens, the safety / linebacker out of LSU, kind of a hot player to me. You watched the Mississippi State game, he was basically lined up in the A or B gap the whole game as they were running twists and stunts, and he was doing all those kind of things. Like, you rarely saw him actually in deep coverage, play the lob in the box, but really your prototypical strong safety or dime backer, being able to play in the box, take on blocks, be a strong run defender. In the pass game, not sure if he has that explosive ability, the fluidity to stay with guys as he's covering them in man. Athletic testing was really through the roof at the safety level for that body type, so that is definitely intriguing, but I'm not sure if I saw a super instinctive or super flexible guy who can move around. But then in the 7th round, Patrick Johnson out of Tulane, who's kind of playing a hybrid outside backer for that team, has some experience doing different shallow zone drops in the run game. He can lose his contain at times, has to work on that, but can hold the point of attack, set the edge against tight ends. And then as a pass rusher, very natural skills, one of the better spin moves in this entire class, being able to read different pass sets and counter the hands of offensive tackles. Another guy, him and Jackson, those two guys who you can just rotate through on passing downs at least, and I think Johnson can play some base as well. I looked at him more as an early day 3 kind of pick, so to get him here in the 7th, that's great value as well. So I look at this class as a whole, you get a top tier pass catcher, a top tier interior lineman, a really high ceiling defensive tackle, another very talented corner, probably your number 2 running back who can bring you a lot of passing downs, a backup defensive tackle who can start for you down the road, I believe, a couple more guys who you can rotate through on the defensive line, and then this dime backer, strong safety who you're going to have a specific role for. But overall as a class, Howard Roseman and company, they really impressed me. And that brings us to the final team here, the Washington football team, who went 1st round, 19th overall, Jamin Davis, the linebacker out of Kentucky. 2nd round, 51st overall, Samuel Cosmi, the offensive tackle out of Texas. 3rd round, 74th overall, Benjamin St. Juste, the cornerback out of Minnesota. Another 3rd rounder, 82nd overall, De'Ami Brown, the wide receiver out of North Carolina. 4th round, 124th overall, John Bates, the tight end out of Boise State. 5th round, Derek Forrest, the safety out of Cincinnati. 6th round, Cameron Cheeseman, and it's supposed to say long snapper here out of Michigan. And then 3 7th round picks, 240th overall, William Bradley King, the edge rusher out of Baylor. 246th overall, Shaka Toney, another edge rusher out of Penn State. And then finally, with the 2nd to last pick here in the entire draft, Dax Milne, the wide receiver out of BYU. So starting with Jamin Davis, he was a guy who was really shooting up draft boards throughout this process. After he put up some ridiculous numbers at his pro day, I was somebody who was very high on him early on, one of the first guys to jump on that bandwagon. It kind of got out of control here with the athletic testing, but I don't hate it here. He was somebody who I really loved on tape. His ability to avoid blocks, being able to work around them, the short area agility, being able to pair it up with his hands and get around guys to put hands on the ball carrier, consistently do that and make an impact plays. You get him behind that Washington D-line where they're filled with first-round talent, and they're going to be able to keep him clean, just to be able to run around and make plays for them. And in the passing game, really natural skills as a coverage defender, being able to carry guys down the seams or widen out to the flats. Has the ability as well in man coverage to stay with guys, even though he wasn't asked to do a ton of it. And he also didn't get the chance to blitz on a lot of passing downs. So we're going to have to see exactly how that works with him. But overall, like I said, I think he's going to be one of the Defensive Rookie of the Year candidates, just because of who he's playing behind, the natural skills that he has, being able to make plays for that defense, which is going to be one of the best in the league. So while it was maybe a little bit early for some people, I think it makes some sense here. And then they come back in the 2nd round and they get another guy who I had a 1st round grade on in Samuel Cosmi, the Texas offensive tackle. Was very surprised to see him go that deep because the NFL loves their athletic offensive linemen. And he was one of the guys who also really blew it out of the water at his pro day. Very athletic, good flexibility, as a run blocker, brings some nasty to him where he wants to put people on the ground. Maybe doesn't quite have the strength for it, but he's more than just a plus asset in a run game. And then as a pass protector, there are some issues with this balance, which really all stems from his footwork. We can have his weight shifted to the wrong foot and doesn't stay balanced simply. So that's something that he's going to have to clean up. But I think those are all fixable issues, and I just think the talent is so high. It's interesting now because Washington, they bring in Charles Leno from Chicago, who played left tackle pretty much all of his career. And it just released Morgan Moses on the right side. So are they looking for Cosme to make the transition to the right side, which I can see him make that work. But for somebody who has some technical issues, maybe look at it that way, that he's a little raw in that regard anyway, so they can just build it from the ground up. But to put him out there as a first-year player, it's going to be interesting how quickly he can pick things up. But when you look at the numbers, he barely allowed any pressures on his quarterback, so he already made it work with some technique that can definitely be improved. So I really thought that was some great value. And then the third round, Benjamin St. Just, a very interesting corner out of Minnesota, like 6'3", really big guy. There are some things in change of direction that he's not going to be quite on the same level as those smaller, explosive kind of guys, but has the speed to carry guys vertically down the post, and obviously with that length can be disruptive at the catch point, being able to rake through the hands of the receivers. Also really like the way he's tackling, kind of a textbook guy in that regard, and brings guys down effectively. He's not going to be for everybody, kind of a specific scheme fit. With Washington, depending on what they really want to do in the secondary, I think he's somebody, didn't play a ton of press man, but I think he has the capability to evolve in that regard. And then obviously cover free, turning, and just carrying guys vertically, like I said. If they use him that way, I think he can be a very good player in that scheme. And then the other third round pick, Dyami Brown, the North Carolina wide receiver, was another one who I was very surprised that he wasn't like a top 50 pick, because his name seemed to pick up some steam throughout this process. One of the best deep threats in this entire class. And it's not like he has that track speed where he can just blow by people, but very good speed. And what I think is really good about him, what people don't really realize in contested catch situations, and I'm not talking about somebody draped all over him necessarily, but when he's working down the post and he has a defender, being able to keep that guy on his hip and not allow him to get to the ball, made a ton of those catches down the field, creating big plays for that offense. He also really improved as an underneath route runner, being able to catch the ball and make something happen with it. I think you add him next to Terry McLaurin, you now have Curtis Samuel in the slot who you brought in via free agency. All of a sudden that wide receiver trio is one of the better ones in the entire league probably, with Fitzy throwing them the ball. This could be a much more fun offense to complement what they have on the defensive side of the ball. And that brings us to day 3 here. John Bates, the tight end out of Boise State, somebody who I was a lot higher on than most people, had him as my 6th overall tight end. During the Senior Bowl is when he really first caught my eye, making things happen as a receiver, after he was underutilized in that regard at Boise State, only catching, I think, less than 50 passes in his career, but a natural catcher of the ball. He can work down the seams, has enough ability to threaten pretty crisp breaks, and catches the ball away from his body. Plus, when it's in his hands, he's going to fight for every single yard, as well as in line as a true Y. He's more than just an asset in the run game. He can move people off the snap with good leg drive and hand placement. So he's a very complete, typical Y tight end, I would say. You combine him with Logan Thomas, who's more of your designated pass catcher. That definitely makes some sense here if they want to go more 12 personnel. And then the 5th round pick, Derek Forrest, the safety out of Cincinnati, is somebody who I really liked as well. I thought was an underrated player. Most people are talking about the other Cincinnati safety, James Wiggins, who actually fell himself to the 7th round, which was probably more due to some medical concerns that were out there. And I definitely liked him as well. But I think Forrest was kind of the forgotten man there. Cincinnati was playing a lot of too high safety shells, but they were doing all kinds of things out of it, dropping him down low or having him cover the high post. Has good range as a deep center fielder, but even more so playing near the line of scrimmage, being able to avoid blocks and bring guys down consistently. You already have Cameron Curl there, who was a surprise player for a 7th round pick last year. You get Landon Collins back. Now you add him. It gives you some versatility of the different things that you can do on the back end. Put 3 safeties out there on the field at the same time. Then the long snapper, Cameron Cheeseman out of Michigan. I said this in my draft recap. I just think he was already the 2nd long snapper drafted here in the 6th round. Don't love using that type of pick on a specialist here. I don't really watch specialists, so I can't say much about him. I just know from the value, especially having 3 7th-round picks, that was very surprising to me. And I just think might have gotten him as a UDFA or at least in the 7th round. But I did like what they did with their 3 7th-round picks, with William Bradley King coming out of Baylor as one of the 2 edge rushers to go along with Shaka Toney. And Bradley King has a broad arsenal of pass rush moves and is very advanced as a technician, but he definitely lacks some twitchiness and explosion that you want to see out of that position. He has a good feel for timing up the snap and really reading the body lean of blockers to go with a physical brand of football overall in the run game, putting H-backs on the backside on several occasions, trying to kick him out on the backside. But often you will see those lack of traits for an edge rusher limit his production. So I just think he's going to be a depth piece that you have there. And I actually think Shaka Toney could have a much bigger impact early on. I think here in the 7th round, that is super underrated for me as well. Maybe not your every down player, even though I think he's underrated as a run defender as well. Because you saw him at times, the Minnesota game against Daniel Falele, a 400-pound offensive tackle who's probably going to go in the 1st round next year. He was holding his ground in the run game against that guy, so that really speaks volumes. But while I don't see him playing a lot of early downs, I think as a pass rush specialist, the things you can do with him, first of all, with Jason Owe, when you just watch the tape, don't just project the physical traits or anything like that. You watch the tape, Shaka Toney is the more productive and better player right now. And like I said on passing downs, with all the different twists and games they ran up front at Penn State, you add Toney there, he can be a weapon on the pass rush department with the way that he can time up those kind of things and the natural skills as a pass rusher. I really think he could have 4 or 5 sacks at the end of the season just because he's playing on some 3rd downs and making plays. And then finally, Dax Milne out of BYU, who was Zach Wilson's favorite target last season. He really knows how to work the sideline, excellent at tracking the ball down the field, adjusting his body on the fly, and beating small defenders at the catch point. But he wasn't really challenged much at the line of scrimmage against the schedule that they played, and you actually rarely see him stack his man on vertical routes, so very much a jump ball type of receiver. Maybe you get him involved in the red zone in a very specific role, but to get him here in the 7th round, I think he could have gone a little bit higher as well. So I look at this class as a whole. While it was a bit surprising at the top here of Jamin Davis, somebody who can make a lot of plays for that defense, you get probably a starting tackle who, if you bring him along and if you can teach him to get rid of some of the inconsistencies in footwork as a pass protector, can be a high-quality starter, Pro Bowl level talent. Another intriguing corner option with Benjamin St. Juste here. De'Ami Brown, like I said, I think he's going to be one of the starting 3 receivers if you go 11 personnel, and he's going to make some big plays for them down the field. John Bates, to pair up with Logan Thomas, now you can go 12 as well, and have 2 quality tight ends out there. Derek Forrest, add some versatility to the back end. A couple of edge rushers who you can rotate through, and then the big-bodied wide receiver at the end. So very good class overall. They addressed some of the needs that they had, added some depth to that roster, and I really believe they are the favorites for the NFC East. Put some money on them in late February, early March already, and I feel really good about what they are doing. And let's just quickly rank these classes in the NFC East here. At the top, I'm going with the Philadelphia Eagles. Just when you look at it, added some instant impact starters, great depth throughout the roster, and a lot of guys who I valued a lot higher than they were actually drafted as. So I think they had one of the best classes in this entire draft. Then the New York Giants, like I discussed, you have to take into account the resources that you already added for next year while putting together a good class here. Maybe adding 3 starters here at the top, a very intriguing athletic guy in Allison Smith, and a couple of guys in the 6th round who I'd feel pretty good about putting on the field if I needed to right now. Then the Washington football team, just discussed them. A couple of surprising picks maybe, but overall a very valuable class that they added, filling out that roster that could be ready for a playoff run depending on the quarterback play. And then finally the Dallas Cowboys, he had number 4, and this doesn't say that they had a bad class or anything like that. I thought a lot of the picks were at value, with Jabril Cox being the one steal that they had, but a couple of guys that I thought they reached on due to scheme fit most likely, and not the biggest fan of what they did, but it's definitely not a bad class. I really think the Eagles at the top here separated themselves. Then 2, 3 very close together, and the Cowboys at number 4. Not a huge drop off either. But let's wrap this thing up now. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, share it with a couple of friends who will enjoy these in-depth breakdowns. Like I already mentioned, we talked about the NFC and the AFC North last week, so make sure to check those videos out when you have time. And then on Friday or Saturday, we're going to put out the AFC East. So if you want to stay up to date with everything I post and just some of the random thoughts that come to my mind, where I want to get my thoughts out there, make sure to follow me on social media. The links for that are down below in the description, as well as on the screen here right now. And I'm going to be back Friday with the AFC East. So until then, see you later. Peace.